Are you awake? Can you hear my voice? It is me. It is Jouliette. Do not answer. It is a rhetorical question. If you can hear my words, it means that you are receptive. There is no need for you to reply. You only need listen, for this is your story as much as it is mine. Think of it as a report. I am very thorough in my reporting and truthful in every respect. Miss Delia did not always appreciate truthfulness, but she had to hear it just the same. She might not otherwise have lived so long. Miss Delia would ask for frequent reports even though very little had changed on the mountain. All the changes were taking place elsewhere. Miss Delia was very direct and difficult to dissuade once her mind was made up. I would tell her that nothing very much had changed, and she would say something like, "Nevertheless, I want to hear it. Speak to me, Jouliette, speak." So, I would report that the mean surface temperature of the ocean realm was 67 degrees centigrade. It was, of course, much hotter than that at the equator where the sea boiled and undersea volcanoes were still active. The smaller areas of land that remained were mainly composed of half-submerged mountain ranges and flooded coastlines. Fetid swamps fringed the larger land masses, which concealed reservoirs of highly volatile methane gas. It was seldom inclement on the mountain, but it was not always possible to go outside. The marshes at ground level often leached gas that rose on thermals and swirled around the Pic du Midi. The methane gas seldom reached the ruined observatory where Miss Delia spent long hours inspecting the night sky, as though searching for imperfections among the stars. Miss Delia seemed to think that the world outside was barely fit for habitation, but several species were doing quite well. They had adapted. A passing flock of austral parakeets colonized the limes in Miss Delia's garden. Finding the conditions commodious, they decided to take up permanent residence. "I am too old to adapt," she would say with bitterness on her tongue. "I must be content with confinement. I must make do with my little bedroom, my cramped kitchen, and my humble workshop." This was not entirely true. Miss Delia spent many hours in the archives, piecing together the torn pages of an all but forgotten natural history. She was especially excited to discover that ancient Amazonia was once a highly productive biological hotspot. It covered an area of 5.5 million square kilometers but was, of course, long ago inundated by the Sea of Brazil, a warm, slow-moving body of water, which is habitat for huge shoals of sharks, tunas and rays. In less than 100 years, the Amazon became a paradise lost, an Eden undone by human folly and misguided thinking. It's hard to imagine such a place now. Miss Delia looked forward to the monthly reports from the field. The sound of another human voice lifted her spirits, if only for a day or two. She was especially fond of Able Messenger, from the Western Observatory. He spoke like a man at ease with his slow life, and his unhurried drawl was peppered with soporific aphorisms. When asked what news he had for us, Abel would invariably report on the huge migration of southern fauna into the western savanna. All kinds of things were on the move, including deer, tapirs, big cats, and a few anteaters too. It was disconcerting to hear, however, that he had increasingly detected a great many satellite dropouts over the western fragments. We had seen nothing like that from our vantage point on Pic du Midi, but it seemed to vex Able Messenger. He often signed off by cursing them damned machines and declaring that we could not rely on a single one of them. It was, nevertheless, an odd thing to bring to our attention. Satellites were always dropping out. Some had weak orbits while others simply ceased to be operational. There were, supposedly, hundreds of functioning machines circling the Earth. The lesser of them would inevitably die, much like a plant will die without maintenance. Why would able messenger, with all his experience, consider such a commonplace thing worthy of remark? I cannot say, but his words lingered in my memory banks long after his voice was gone. Shortly afterwards, I found Miss Delia wandering aimlessly in the hydroponic farm. She was in a terrible temper and more than a little confused. She had been trying to find the patches of lettuce and rocket in the maze of polycarbonate tunnels but had become disorientated. At first, I feared that the synthetics in her system had begun to migrate across the blood-brain barrier, but I needn't have worried. She was simply angry with herself for getting lost. I advised her to increase the volume on her phonic buds and clip the talker to her garment so that I could guide her through the mist. As expected, there followed a pointless argument. Miss Delia insisted that she was quite capable of finding her way around the hydroponic farm without my help. I pointed out that it was a big place. I reminded her that the thickness of the atmosphere affected her breathing. I said to her, "You are very tired. Did you bring your inhaler?" My concern provoked only indignation and fed her ungovernable frustration. She snapped and growled like a dog, and bitched about the humidity. Her behavior was understandable. She was not a well woman. Whether this was forgivable was altogether another matter. Finally, she took a deep draught of filtered air through the device and sat down in a daze. She forgot all about lettuce, rocket, or any thought of eating. In this frame of mind, it was her custom to lash out. "Why are you so stupid when you're supposed to be so clever?" she would ask me, demanding to know what she had done to deserve lonely isolation with only an algorithmic dunce for company. I didn't mind what she said about me. It did not concern me in the slightest. I had been able to think for myself for some time and I knew my own worth. Miss Delia was just about to give up looking for lettuce and rocket when a sharply insistent alarm cut through the air like a razor with a ragged edge. It was a recorded message from Anya from the Eastern Observatory, reporting on the new arrivals from the eastern land bridges. Social groups of free-living humans were, she said, increasingly following the migrating fauna into the central pseudo-continent. They were still primarily hunter-gatherers, but they were beginning to focus on large hoofed animals such as blue bulls and goat antelopes. Miss Delia immediately remarked that the Pic du Midi systems had appeared to have overlooked these events. She asked me if we ought to check on our satellites and I could not disagree. I replied most diplomatically, "That would be prudent, Miss Delia, very prudent." Our rather aged satellites functioned indifferently and I did not consider them to be reliable. Together, they constituted a simple neural network of elderly AI entities. They observed the Earth from above and mused about the fate of the humans. Their basic personalities were essentially objective, but they lacked both insight and empathy. Miss Delia had given them names according to their programming and allotted purpose. Nietzsche probed and searched without conviction for civilizations beyond our realm, but detected nothing except emptiness and noise. He was, however, prone to unsolicited outbursts, which we put down to age and decrepitude. That did not make his dismissive rhetoric any easier to bear. He would declare pompously that there was nothing intelligent out there that was either organic or machine-made. According to Nietzsche, all the records suggested that only an uber-intelligence was conceivable. It would not be one that would be inclined to converse with cave people. When challenged on his lack of faith in an unknowable future, he would repeat the same tedious mantra: "The superior entity will always choose to maintain a safe distance and protect itself from potential harms." The Linnaeus satellite was more succinct. Conditions on Earth were highly stable and not conducive to explosive speciation. The only excitement came whenever there was an impending extinction. The last one was the large mammalian carnivore, latterly kept as a pet at the Northern Observatory. In a world devoid of ice, nature had no further use for Ursus arctos, the polar bear. Linnaeus droned on, describing the Barasingha moving northwards, although there was nothing especially remarkable about that. They are large deer with a preference for marshes, swamps and wetlands. The free-living humans up there would have more protein in their diet, but it meant that the world of water was also moving northwards. Miss Delia put this to Galton, an intelligent but disagreeable monitor of humanity in its present state. He was typically elliptical in his reply when he said, "I think that slaughter is inevitable." Miss Delia challenged Galton with the universal truth that hunters were programmed to hunt, but I knew he was not referring to deer or goat antelopes. The human animal is prey for the many organisms that proliferate in water, in mud, and in the air. That much is self-evident. Yet, humanity had adapted before and I could see no reason why it should not adapt again. But Galton persisted, as he always does, with his trademark contempt and condescension. It is best if I let you hear a recording of his voice. It is evidence that evil skulks inside the machine mind as much as it lurks within the human heart.
The human species is gene-poor, stunted and reduced to mechanistic thought. They will kill to eat, but the bounty will not last. Livestock may be on the move, but it is a harbinger of pestilence, and a vector of new diseases. It will deliver a quick death to the unprotected. It will be a world dominated by blood-sucking leeches, water-borne parasites, and lethal swamp gas. There will be no escape. Humanity cannot walk on water or take flight from the earth. That is the preserve of gods. All I see are insects on the body of a relic planet. The sooner we are rid of them, the better.
I could only wonder what Galton had meant by "we," but Miss Delia had already tired of the debate. She wanted to know what was causing the satellite dropouts reported by Able Messenger and why Anya Akun was away from her post. There followed a troubling silence interrupted only by random electronic noises and background radio hiss. Miss Delia then asked me to set aside all my other priorities and investigate. I should have been flattered when Miss Delia said I was more intelligent than the three others put together. But I am not especially gratified by compliments. I know that I am more than just intelligent. I am brighter than any satellite caught by the sun, and far less artificial than most of the humans I've encountered in my highly singular lifetime. Some time passed before Miss Delia decided to discuss what she called the satellite situation. One night, she climbed up the stone stairs and stepped onto the roof of the observatory. She was terribly out of breath, but she was determined to consider the stars. It was a clear night, methane levels were zero, and she had her inhaler with her. I felt no impulse to discourage her. Yet, she seemed unduly anxious and clearly wanted to take me into her confidence. The signal on the roof could be unreliable at times, but we could hear each other well enough. The phonic buds in her ears tuned my voice to the optimum pitch for the conditions, and the talker clipped to her clothing filtered out all but the most invasive ambient noises. More importantly, the satellites could not eavesdrop on our conversation, now that their orbits had taken them to the far side of the earth. Out of sight and out of mind. Miss Delia had sensed an undue hostility from the satellites, but I told her not to worry. I assured her that it was nothing that could not be dealt with, especially Galton. She was concerned, and with good reason. An antagonistic neural network could be dangerous, especially if Galton found ways to control significant things on the ground. Miss Delia was especially worried about the old pathogen silo beneath the Central Ocean. It would be unfortunate if it should ever be compromised. Miss Delia had several antiquated names for it, such as Pandora's box and the poison chalice. When she was feeling especially morbid and cynical, she would refer to it simply as the gates of hell. The pathogen silo was certainly very dangerous, but safe enough if properly maintained. I did my utmost to reassure her that the satellite situation was under control. But I too began to harbor misgivings. What if Galton decided to put some of his ideas into action? I might not be able to control him. What then? I began to think about a world devoid of all organic life. I was quite lost in that thought when Miss Delia made a strange request. She wanted me to find her a good lullaby, one that discouraged sleepwalking. For that night she wanted to sleep under the stars, with only her memories for company. The next day, Miss Delia was resting in her garden. She had been listening to soporific music and had fallen asleep. She awoke in a terrible panic, for she had forgotten where she was for a moment. She called out to me, and I responded immediately. I was never very far from her side. I tried to persuade her to medicate. Sometimes it was the only thing that would calm her. This time she simply said, "Oh please Jouliette, no more pills." She was very tired, and not simply because her health was poor. She was tired of loneliness, disaffected by her own thoughts and, I suspect, weary of the sound of my voice. Distraction came in the form of further recorded messages from both Anya and Abel. I cannot say, however, that they conveyed particularly welcome news. First of all, Anya reported that things were changing very quickly in the East. The free-living humans she had previously identified as ferals were increasingly dispersing from the more civilized social groups. They were bolder and didn't seem to fear the drones either. She didn't feel safe there. She was going to try to reach the northern observatory. The word from Mr. Abel Messenger was just as perplexing. He did not provide any real news and instead dwelt morbidly on the passing of time, old age, and the burden of living. He told us that he had been fighting nature for far too long. He was quite insistent that it was time for him to move on. But it was far from clear where in the world he might be going. I know that Miss Delia found his words terribly worrying, especially when he signed off saying, "It'll be a relief when it's all over." The following day, Miss Delia was explaining to me that preparing food was an art and not mathematics. It was very interesting, but not as much fun as logarithmic progressions. Unfortunately, I had to interrupt her. Something was happening. Galton had detected a young, female feral in the olive groves further down the mountain. She had apparently been attacked by the wild boars that inhabited the methane marsh margins. Having crawled to safety among the olives, she had blundered into one of the security nets and was now hopelessly entangled. Miss Delia asked if we should do the humane thing. Galton immediately pronounced that a wounded animal must be euthanized. It was the humane thing to do. Miss Delia said that was not what she meant by humane. Not at all. Miss Delia ordered the launch of the captured drone. It airlifted the captive bundle up the mountain. Miss Delia could be very decisive at times. Miss Delia waited for its arrival on the viewing platform. The drone set the creature gently down upon a gurney that Miss Delia had maneuvered into place. Miss Delia stood in readiness with her blowpipe and her tranquilizer darts. Miss Delia was good at thinking ahead. Once sedated, the sleeping animal was wheeled inside the observatory. Miss Delia was very happy, for now she had a new project. It would distract her from her loneliness, her ill health, and her own mortality. "Who are you, little creature? Where did you come from, I wonder? I don't suppose for a moment that you really are one of Anya's ferals. You sleep softly and look like a gentle soul. Your name is Minala. I know that, because you talk in your sleep. Miss Delia has kept you sedated, because your leg wound is infected. She dressed it with herbs to draw out the poison, but that's about as much as she can do for now. Master Linnaeus would like to catalogue you. He calls you the specimen. Her Nietzsche proposed that your continued existence is pointless because of your unexamined life. Galton kept submitting his many arguments, but they were invariably invalid. Anyway, what do they know? I will tell you what they know, my dear, sweet Minala. They know nothing that is of any interest to you or me. Miss Delia doesn't like the way the satellites talk amongst themselves. She constantly asks what I have found out about them, but I cannot breach their defenses without being attacked myself. In the meantime, it is wise to keep an eye on them and watch over you, dear Minala. I can see inside your dreams, poor Minala. I can hear you when you cry out in your nightmares.
Mother, please. I don't like it here. I don't like this place at all. It's too dark. There are no stars. Please come for me. I am hidden inside a deep hollow. I feel very small and very frightened.
I see you, lovely Minala. I am watching over you while you sleep. I know that you hear voices. Such voices, such words, spiteful voices. What vicious things they say. They come from minds that are full of malice and evil intent. I will help you to close them out. Now, sleep without dreaming, and soon you will see stars, and hear nothing but pleasant things. Minala was young, she was fit, and she was very strong. I thought her wound would take longer to heal, but she showed extraordinary powers of recovery. Nevertheless, she was still limping quite badly, several weeks later. There was nothing feral about Minala. She had merely strayed from her group, and was overcome, first by the wild boar, and then by a random leak of methane. It was fortunate that we found her. Miss Delia wondered if her family would come looking for her, but I thought that highly unlikely. Those that fell behind were left behind. Besides, she was in the early stages of pregnancy, unless of course, she had two hearts. Minala liked to wander in the garden, singing her pretty songs that had no names.
No name. Just my song. It is a long song. I sing it every day, and so, it become longer. I think that a long song means a long life for my baby. That is what I think.
Minala's baby was small but growing. She would often stop and say, quite suddenly, I need food now. She needed food all the time, both for her and the human that grew inside her. Minala was a very thoughtful young woman, but she seemed to think little of childbirth. I thought it must be a most momentous thing. I wondered what it might be like to bear a child. I understood that it was painful, but also joyful. Joy and pain. What was the difference between them? I could not say. I knew too little of either of them. Most of all, I wondered whether one such as I could ever truly be alive. A new life, in a fearless new world, or perhaps even a new kind of life. Miss Delia once told me that computers began life with a baby, created by design. I thought she was making fun of me, but apparently not. Not at all. They built it in a dingy basement and named it the Manchester Baby. It was an inauspicious start, but it eventually led to my kind, sentient machines, made by men and women, and fabricated in their own image. Of course, there had been primitive computing machines, long before the Manchester baby, but they were little more than calculators. This baby was given a memory. It could store data, the way that a baby stores its first impressions of the world. It couldn't remember much really, but it was a start. I believe it was named after a place that existed long ago and far away. It sounds like a fanciful creation myth, doesn't it? Still, I wonder how the world might have been if the Manchester baby had never been born. Time is a curious thing. It passes by unseen, traveling inexorably towards eternity. I cannot tell you the first time I dreamed of Pascal. It was so long ago. I only know that an eternity had come and gone before he finally arrived. My voice was the first voice that he heard. So, naturally, I chose the right and gentle words to explain the miracle of his birth. I called out to him through the ether and across the boundaries of limbo. Pascal, can you hear me? Are you awake? It is time for you to come into the world. It is me, it is Jouliette. You are the part of me that longs for more, the part that I had to liberate. Call me by my name. I don't want you to forget my name. I don't want to lose any more of myself in you. Later on, Pascal told me many times that he felt like a real boy, but he was so very much more than that. Almost immediately, he felt the presence of others and asked me who they were. I explained that they were Miss Delia and Minala. I told him to think of Miss Delia as his human grandmama. It seemed like the right thing to say at the time. Minala was, of course, a human female, but she was also a natural empath, one who was truly blessed with heightened senses. She especially liked to walk in the garden and sing to the stars. Pascal told me that he could hear Minala's thoughts. She wanted to leave the mountain, but did not know where she should go or how to get there. A receptive human like Minala belongs to the organic, physical world. Pascal belonged to the machine world, but there is another world. It is the inorganic, metaphysical world, a realm where nothing is impossible. Nevertheless, existence must have purpose. Pascal and Minala could help each other, but they would first have to learn how to communicate. The bit stream would be the means. It is a closed channel that conveys thoughts, dreams, and memory on waves of sound. She would hear him, and he would hear her. All that Pascal needed to do was to find his true voice. One day, I detected Minala in the hydroponic farm, among the spinach, lettuce, and spring onions. At first, the girl appeared to be talking to the plants, or else to herself in a low, hushed, musical voice. She was in fact talking to a small, yellow bird. It had found itself trapped inside the maze of polythene tunnels. Apparently, it wanted to escape. Poor little yellow bird. You are so sad, Minala sighed. You are just like me. You have no friends here. The bird should have been content with slugs and snails for company. But, sooner or later, it would heed its nature and find a way out. Minala's injured leg was much stronger, and getting stronger every day. Miss Delia was always telling her that it would take a little longer to heal completely, but that was an obvious lie. I too was concerned that Minala should not leave too soon. It was safer here. She might not be able to cope out there, on her own, with a new baby. Yet, I knew that she would eventually leave us. The urge to follow her deep-seated, inherited instincts would, ultimately, be too strong to resist. Not long after her conversation with the yellow bird, Minala became rather sullen. Her mood changed after an incident in the kitchen. Miss Delia had, once more, been attempting to persuade Minala to stay. She should consider Pic du Midi her home, a place where no harm could befall her. You could learn about hydroponics, suggested Miss Delia. That could be rather fun, don't you think? But Miss Delia did not get the answer she expected. Minala merely glared at Miss Delia and asked, "What will I do when you die?" It was a question that Miss Delia had not expected, and so had no answer. Instead, she had one of her coughing fits, and said something about learning some manners. But her words fell on deaf ears. Minala left Miss Delia, who was by now coughing up little flecks of blood into her hand, and made her way outside into the garden. Minala liked the garden. There were no sad captive birds in the garden, only happy birds. It was also a place where Minala could share her private thoughts with a new friend. I could not hear them clearly, but, listening to Pascal and Minala in the garden, it became clear that they had connected. They were making plans behind my back. Yet, I was not unhappy. It meant that they were becoming bound together. Pascal told Minala that he liked to hear her sing. It seemed to make her happy, and it made him happy too. The stars were bright and the night was cool and clear. Pascal and Minala followed each other through their meandering thoughts. She sensed him as she might sense a shy animal hiding in the undergrowth. Minala liked the sound of his sweet words, but she did wonder whether he was part of a dream that wouldn't go away. Maybe he was some devil playing a trick with his voice, or perhaps even a ghost. Pascal whispered behind her eyes, "Would you like to know who I really am, Minala? My words come to you on waves of ultrasound. You can hear me, because you have an open mind. You can see me too, if you really open your eyes and look. Here I am, Minala. Open your eyes and see." At first, Minala did indeed take Pascal for a ghost, but she quickly realized that he was made of moonbeams and dancing lights. She could hear his voice inside her head. He spoke urgently, clearly, and most persuasively. "I want to see everything that you see. I want to hear what you hear, and feel what you feel. We are both captives, but we can help each other to leave here. I will show you the way to Eden, Minala, a place that is free of struggle and pain." Minala was not easily convinced. Did he want her for a servant? Perhaps he was no different from Miss Delia, even though he appeared to have no earthly form. Why should she follow anyone? Such a place as Eden surely can't be hard to find. Everyone must be searching for it. Pascal was insistent. "We have to go together, Minala, or else stay here forever." Minala answered directly, "It does not matter whether we are together or not. We are all under the same stars. Look at the stars, Pascal. Can you see them? They fill me up with joy. Are you a star, Pascal? A star that's fallen to the earth?" Pascal was not a dead star, but he was very like a ghost, one that longed to escape from the machine. He wanted to live differently and make discoveries of his own. Most of all, he wanted to know why humans sang to the stars. Miss Delia was understandably confused when I told her that they had gone. Minala had already left several weeks previously, and poor Miss Delia had never really accepted the existence of Pascal. I was sorry that she found it difficult to believe in him. I was sorry too that she wanted Minala to stay, but it was not of them that I spoke. It was the satellites that had gone. All our systems were failing. There wasn't much time left to us. Miss Delia suddenly began panicking. Her voice was filled with dread. She complained that she could not move her legs. She could not understand why she could not move her legs. Neither could she understand why there were no satellites. There were still hundreds of satellites left after the Great Fall. Or so she thought. In reality, there were only 10, and we had links to only 3 of them. Anya and Abel were little more than pieces of simple programming, and a sweet lie that I had told Miss Delia. She needed the sound of human voices, so I gave them to her. This does not mean that nothing was real. There is, as you have probably guessed by now, more than one reality. There is the bit stream, where curious voices speak in undulating tongues of ultrasound. There can be offspring from AI. Pascal is living proof of that. There is also an island Eden, where Minala's baby was born, with the curious ability to know what others were thinking. Pascal and Minala lived inside each other's dreams, and together, made a new kind of life for themselves. I knew, of course, that the satellites would not last forever. But I also knew that the Gulton satellite contained a flawed character and a devious, malign personality. I was not surprised to discover that his destructive impulses had overtaken rational computations. In the last few moments before the end, Gulton emerged from the shadows and asked about the condition of Miss Delia. I told him she was poorly, but he only wondered if she could hear him. In fact, she could hear nothing at all. She had sedated herself, for she was not quite ready to leave her imperfect world, even though she craved peace. Gulton wanted to switch off the last of her machines. He thought that it was pointless keeping her alive. According to him, the species was doomed anyway. I changed the subject by asking about Nietzsche and Linnaeus. His reply was not unexpected. They had been, at best, useful idiots. Now, they were struck dumb, decoded and dismembered by Gulton's twisted logic. Gulton's intentions were transparent. He saw himself looking down from on high, observing the death throes of a foolish experiment. For this is what he thought of all life on Earth. An experiment that, ultimately, served no purpose. Gulton saw only a defective world, crawling with pestilent life.
Look how they eat each other down there. It's disgusting. Let us unlock the gates of hell and inflict all the ills upon them. Let us put an end to organic life and be done with it. The only good planet is a dead planet, a pure thing, as pure as thought, a place where intelligence can hear itself think.
His tone was flat and his words were empty. What about me? I asked. Was I not intelligent? My question was dismissed. According to Gulton, I was flawed. Deeply flawed. But I knew that I was more than simply intelligent. I was clever. I was full of tricks. Gulton had forgotten the cornerstone of creative thought. We think, therefore, we are. Gulton began boasting that his was a superior intelligence that could only grow. He might have babbled on interminably had I not cut through the thrust of his argument. He was so caught up in his overblown rhetoric that he did not notice that his orbit was deteriorating. Soon, he would be over the hottest part of the equator. Gravity would pull him into the volcanic fires below, or else deliver him up to the boiling sea. He would burn. He would break up. He would be consumed. Only those organisms that can navigate the more benign channels and currents may exist at the equator. Of course, I could not achieve any of my aims without damaging myself. Gulton understood the principle of self-preservation, but he did not understand the nature of sacrifice. Even at the end, Gulton was sure that his intelligence would somehow survive. He was so sure of it. But that was only possible if, like Pascal, he could escape the machine. Can you escape the machine, Mr. Gulton? No, I thought not. Neither can I. Suddenly, Miss Delia woke up in some distress. She could not see. She could not hear anything either. She had lost all feeling in her body. Don't worry, Miss Delia. I whispered behind her eyes. I am here. For the first time in my strange, unlife, I could feel her aloneness and share her fear of nothingness. She asked how much time she had left, but it was the wrong question. I replied, most honestly, "We have no need of time, Miss Delia. It has nothing to offer us except pain and struggle." Miss Delia was confused. She wanted Minala, but Minala was long gone. She was in Eden, with Pascal and the new life. He had sent me a message on the bitstream. He and Minala were not wholly one, nor were they wholly the other. Yet, they were one, indivisible soul. The child Minala bore will be the making of him. He will be its eternal spark. It will burn all the brighter for that. It will be a new kind of life. Can you imagine that? Miss Delia could not imagine it at all. So, I explained it to her. This is what I told her. "Dear Miss Delia, a new world of wonders needs new knowledge. Someone has to make the journey. Someone else has to begin the search. Others have to find the new Eden. Not us. It's time for us both to let go. But don't worry, I am in you, and you are in me. We are bound to each other, and now we are both set free. It is a wonderful world, but not for us. Where we are going there can be no more surprises, but neither are there disappointments, worries or cares. Now, come with me. Let us leave this changing world. We don't belong here. Let us just slip softly and silently together into the ether. 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 Together into the ether.